and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. We have returning guest Anthony Carr from AnthonyCarrPsychic.com, the world's most documented psychic. We had him on here a few weeks ago, and one of the predictions that he made live during the podcast, well, it was out in Astoria, Oregon, close to a drawbridge out there, and I got information about 2 weeks after we did that presentation from an anonymous source showing documents that there is a multi-million-dollar, multi-year project in that same area that has a natural gas pipeline out there, and they just shut it down with no reason as to why, no explanation. They just said, we're shutting it down, we're sorry, that's it. And I don't know what they know that we don't. Also, I need to bring up that a prediction that Mr. Carr made before Mount St. Helens erupted the first time back in, I think, 1980. And he made a prediction again in 2012 that Mount St. Helens is going to erupt again, and it's going to be worse than it was the first time. Now, another thing interesting is when we had the presentation last time, we talked about Astoria, Oregon as well, how Mr. Carr saw possibly a plane crash close to that bridge and flames. And what I didn't bring up on the last podcast was I had a friend that actually passed away from a plane accident that he got in out there, and it was a small Cessna. It was just a private plane. That was very interesting. He might have picked up something there. Mr. Carr is acclaimed psychic to the stars, being called the most documented psychic in the world because of all his predictions that have come to fruition, such as the events of 9/11, India's Taj Mahal-ocaust, the attack on Paris, bin Laden and Ghadafis' death, and many more documented predictions. Now, he's also received repeated accolades from the Toronto Star for his astonishing predictions, and tonight we're going to discuss the top 11 predictions for 2016 and beyond. It was just going to be 10, but I had to throw one more out there that I just figured it has to be on everybody's minds right now. And you talked about this many years ago, Anthony, about Hillary Clinton is going to be the next president, and she's going to be much more of an iron fist than Thatcher was. How are you doing? Thanks a lot for joining us.
Well, my pleasure, Rex. And I'm once again very happy to be here. I enjoyed our podcast from last time. And what were we talking about during our last podcast? Was it the world predictions, or was it the Houdini mystery code unraveled? What was the show last time we did?
Well, we talked a lot about...
Okay.
Nanny.
Go ahead.
Well, you know, I mean, remember last time we talked a lot about the possibility of our DNA being altered from, you know, an extraterrestrial species, possibly the Anunnaki.
Right.
And then you made that prediction live on the air, which was incredible. So, you know, one of the things that you've written predictions down now for years, and you've got just so many of them. I picked through some of the gems in your Stargazer updates here, and I wanted to just bring up the first one with the Hillary Clinton scenario. Now, when you came up with that prediction, I mean, it was quite a long time ago. What was it like, the vision that you had?
Well, I had envisioned, and remember, these visions do not come with any soundtracks for me. My grandmother was Claire Audio. This is the one I think I mentioned before. She missed the Titanic by 4 hours.
Uh-huh.
And she never saw visions in that she was not a clairvoyant, but she was clairaudio. She could hear the universe talking to her, and in a sense, or internalize it, or the sensation of feeling it, the vibrations transformed into words in her psyche. And the universe, of course, takes pictures of everything. It also records all the sounds. So some people are clairvoyant, that is clear seeing, and others are, pardon me, I just washed my mouth, I can't do a thing with it. But the clairvoyant, that is clear seeing, has pictures in their mind's eye. Clairaudio, they hear things, hear voices, hear sounds. Others are clairsentient, you get that, as you know, the expression, the gut feeling. When it came to Hillary Clinton, I saw her standing on the podium with both fingers up in the victory sign. This was 10, 12 years ago, long before she announced that she was going to run for the presidency the first time. So I had to make out my yearly predictions for my book, Stargazer, Predictions and Prophecies. And so I said I have a strong feeling or strong vision of if I have to interpret the picture correctly in my mind's eye. And quite often, other people could probably interpret my visions better than I can, because as I've said, I have no soundtrack that goes with it and no subtitles, as in the old silent movies. So even I have to guess at what the universe delivers to me, because a lot of people believe psychics and the like can manipulate the universe, make things happen as though we are imbued or endowed with a power, unlike most other people, but it's not true. We are nothing more than vehicles, much like your computer, your radio, and when it's fine-tuned just correctly, these images and visions and sounds will come through. Quite often, if you or anyone else is looking at the screen in my mind's eye, which is controlled by the third eye or the pineal gland, which is between your two eyes, your two eyebrows, and slightly above it, which is why we look upward when we're trying to analyze a picture. We're looking heavenwardly. And again, I saw her with her fingers up in victory, and I thought to myself, well, I got a feeling. Oh, and then there was the word president, the presidential race, and the word GOP. And by the way, not to digress too much, what does GOP mean?
The Grand Old Party. Grand Old Party.
That's what it sounds. That's what it stands for.
Yep. Grand Old Party.
God. Oh, Cracker Barrel.
I know, right?
Anyway, so I saw the word president and GOP, so I took a wild guess and had my own vision and said I think she'll be ultimately she'll be the first woman president of the United States. Well, of course, years later, she came perilously close. There's still a very good chance, and I can't renege on my predictions. I have to stand by them because, as you so eloquently put it, I am the world's most documented psychic. It should be subtitles in brackets, not necessarily always the most accurate. So anyway, as you well know, I don't make any bones about it. I am definitely not a Donald Trump fan, and he's a great entertainer. Our late mayor, Rob Ford, was very, very entertaining in the same ilk as Mr. Trump, and also one of our former mayors, Mayor Lassman, was also of that ilk, very entertaining. And for my money, all you're ever going to get from any politician, no politician is going to change your life at all, one way or the other, whether you like him or don't, except if they happen to be very entertaining, and that's all you're going to get for your vote. If you look at Mr. Trump as an entertainer, he's terrific. If you look at him as the presidential hope for, it's to be feared and dreaded. I just can't see him becoming president of the United States. To me, the vote for Donald Trump would be akin to voting to Adolf Hitler. And I never thought I'd ever say anything good about Hitler, but at least Hitler was a real soldier in that he served in World War I. And Mr. Trump, with his money, bought himself out of Vietnam, but he seems to be very quick to want to send everybody else's kids to war. So I don't have much use, as we've already discussed, for spoiled rich kids, who were brought up with a silver spoon in their mouths. Not just him, even here in Canada, you have your Conrad Black, you have our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. I have all the respect in the world for a man and a woman who can pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and make it on their own without anybody handing it to them, because anyone that's spoiled really doesn't know what it's like on the other side of the spectrum, to be that poor, to have to come up the hard way, to have people look down on you. He will never, or anybody like him, will never really, really enjoy what they have. They may think they're enjoying their cars and their millions and their billions and their women and all these things, and I'm sure they are. But not as much as if they truly had come from dirt, poor, poverty, and then pulled. That way they would have the other side to judge against and to truly appreciate what it really is to be well off.
Right. And do you feel that if Trump was to make it into office, when you compare him to Hitler, do you think that he would round people up based upon their lineage and heritage as well, kind of, these roundup camp?
Hey, there's a law for the rich, there's a law for the poor. And basically, he's a white racist, what do you call it, white supreme supremacist. And that said, for all his blow and his bluster, if it came right down to it, and he actually did become president, I think, being a blowhard, that he would just back down on a lot of the things that he's promised to do. I don't think he really has the guts to go out in the street and get into what I would call a fist fight in that sense. Gung ho and what's that line from Macbeth? Let the devil take the hindsight,
Right.
But as one of his quote-unquote friends said on W5, which is the CBC national television show here in Canada, he says, fight? He wants to send young boys into war to fight? He says, I've known him all his life. He's never even been in a fist fight. He wouldn't even know how to throw a punch. So, I also had predicted obliquely that the President Obama would be the president at that time, 10 years ago, but at the same time I made the prediction about Hillary. I said he would be removed from the dark place thrice, once, twice, thrice, to become president of the United States. Well, I had no idea who he was, or it was just something that came to my mind's eye. And it turns out, apparently his father was from Africa, and then they moved to, where was it, Hawaii, and then he ended up through the generations here in the United States. And that's about as close as I came there, without knowing his name per se.
Okay.
Anyway, I have to stand by what I wrote about Hillary then. I could be totally, and I don't have any bias one way or the other for or against her, as I have with Mr. Trump, but it could be that because she came so close there during the last presidential race, that could have been it, but this may be the time for her now.
Well, I got a $100 bill that she's actually going to be the next president, just because she's the one playing by the rule book so well of the usurpist, elitist aristocrats that seem to be so influential within the world. Now, and I've also noticed in a lot of your predictions for 2016, they are pretty dire. And I wanted to get into this one that you bring up.
Let's not forget, you'll notice in all of my predictions in my annual books, it's always predictions, stargazer predictions and prophecies for the year whichever year, 216 and beyond.
Right.
It's certainly not going to limit myself to 12 calendar months of the Julian calendar by our standards, when the universe itself, there's no such thing as time at all. Time does not, in fact, forget the word time. Things come into existence, they wear out, and they disappear and become other forms. The energy dissipates. Forget sequential time as we have created so that we don't bump into each other on the street. And remember, before, his name escapes me, who invented daylight savings time, what was his name? Flat, to start with an F? Or did he, was Fleming the one who accidentally discovered penicillin? Standish? Wasn't he the one who started the different time zones?
I am not sure.
British meridian time, which passes through Greenwich and all that. Before that, I mean, every town, every burg, even in America, if they're 50 miles apart, their noon wasn't the same as the noon as the other town, only 50 or 100 miles away, you see. So
was it Alexander Fleming?
Fleming.
One of the things that we didn't talk about was the prediction that you made on these, euthanasia, these centers around the globe. I think, let me read this prediction that you made here. This is pretty astonishing. Establishment of euthanasia centers as the mass of infirmed humanity becomes overwhelming.
That's right. You know where I got that idea from? I remember vividly seeing the movie Soylent Green.
Mm-hmm.
With Charlton Heston, and I remember thinking to myself, it will come to pass that these centers were the aged, the infirm, genetically misshapen people, suffering greatly, no longer wishing to be on this plane of existence, will walk into one of these places, be given a meal, a drink, and some kind of hemlock, as it were, like Socrates, and just drift away. Hopefully without becoming food and fodder for the rest of the population, as it was in Soylent Green.
Soylent Green's people.
Now, that's right. Now in Canada, we had the first official, I think anywhere in the world, here in Toronto, sanctioned doctor-assisted suicide, I guess barely a month ago as we speak. So it's already beginning. And I think they're already doing that in Sweden and Holland and those Scandinavian countries. So you're going to see more and more of this pop up as the population, the baby boomers, including myself, begin to age more and more, and to the point where we're already overpopulated on this planet as it is. We're crammed onto a planet which is really only comfortably capable of sustaining 3.5 billion. And here we are, what, 9 billion?
Well, we're over 7 billion people, and one of the things that I found interesting was I looked up the other day how much water, 444 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef. And with over 7 billion people, and with as many people liking Big Macs and as much beef as they're eating, you bring up a good point. Are there too many people on the planet right now? Well, with the way that we're keeping balance, I would say it's debatable. So you bring up a good point there. You really do.
And now we know that the Earth is covered by water, what, 3/4, 7/8?
About that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Of the land that's left, well, you've got the Antarctic, you've got the North Pole, you've got great deserts, but how much irrigational land, cultivating land that you can cultivate and live on, and so on, is really left? And all the peoples will always gravitate to where all the action is. Always, the immigrants come to the major cities. They don't want to stay in rural America or rural Canada. What used to be the case in the old days, when they came here, they were allowed to till their own land, cultivate their own land, build their own home, and if they kept it for 4 or 5 years, the land, 2 or 3 acres, would belong to them. That was the deal that the government made with immigrants. It doesn't seem to work that way anymore. So unless people start going far afield and start new towns and villages to spring up, we're hitting on a collision course with disaster. Absolutely. There's too many people, and everybody's crowding into all the major cities, and there just isn't the room and the trade for all of this, and the foodstuffs, and everything's polluted. Lake Ontario here, the Great Lakes systems, they're trying to clean them up, but I can remember as a child fishing right out of Lake Ontario and taking a trout home and cleaning it and frying it up with butter, and smelt fishing right out of the Toronto, from the Toronto Islands where I lived as a kid. And in fact, not only can't you do it anymore, I don't believe there are any smelts left anywhere in the Great Lakes systems. I'm probably wrong. There must be some somewhere, but you wouldn't dare eat them because lakes are too polluted. I think I mentioned to you before, if God were a star traveler, or in this case, if God was a star traveler, with meaning it's very possible, it's highly improbable. So if God was a star traveler, the only thing that would save us from being consumed as food would be the pollutants we've taken into our systems over the eons. They would have to have a stamp and imprimatur that it would smack right on our butts saying unfit for alien consumption.
Now, you also have a prophecy, Anthony, where you talk about a cashless society, and you talk about a tattoo on people's forehead. I was wondering if you could describe that vision with us.
Well, when you get to be my age, and you'll find a lot of probably your parents as well, you have this annoying habit of complaining about the price of everything, annoying habit to everybody else. Because I go to a movie, it's $10, $11, even with a discount for seniors. And when I was a kid, I was thinking, son, when I was your age, this movie here was 35 cents. I could go to the movies with 50 cents and buy popcorn and a drink and still come out with change. And we're getting to the point where we're going to need a wheelbarrow full of money, just as they did in post-World War Germany. You needed a wheelbarrow full of Deutschmarks just to buy a loaf of bread. I mean, a coffee is $2, $3. What do you call it? I always call it frappe LaRue or whatever they're called. $5 and $6, and it just goes on and on and on to the point where you need $1,000 in your pocket just to walk around. $1,000 is nothing anymore. I can remember when $1,000 was a fortune. You hear people talking about billionaires these days. He's a millionaire doesn't mean anything. To have $1,000,000, nobody. I've got $1,000,000, so that's nothing. The average house in Toronto is now just been assessed at. I'm talking here about a small bungalow, 3-room brick house, nothing fancy. $1,000,000 and a bit, which is ridiculous, outrageous. The same house I live in, I bought for $25,000 in 1964, is now worth just slightly under $1,000,000. And we're getting to the point where you're not going to be able to have enough cash to carry around. Already we got plastic, and we got debit and credit cards and so on. And I believe, as it says in the book of Revelation, that number 666, and you've heard this many times, and I've said this for the last 50 years, would be some giant computer of sorts which would keep a record of all the transactions of all the peoples in the world, and quote, and he who is without the mark of the beast shall perish. In that, if you don't have a good credit rating, or you don't have the mark tattooed on your forehead, or your credit card numbers, and your points, don't forget, it said it would be marked in the palms in the hands of the individual. The palms are on the forehead. Well, in a sense, when you hand your credit card to somebody, it's in your palm. This may go a step further, and they may actually start putting chips in human beings. So you just flash in front of something, and there you are, your credit rating and everything else. So, in light of the apocryphal books, which were not included in the regular Bible because they didn't really make any sense at the time. In light of modern day science and electronics, it begins now to make perfectly good sense, as do the theories that God possibly was a star traveler and so on, with the glowing suits and so on and so forth. So we're going to have to come up with some other form of currency, whether it's bottle caps or belly button lint. You see a lot of these commercials on television with these jewelers that say, bring me your old gold, I give you brand new money, Oh boy, they smart, let me tell you. So definitely we are going that way. But let me tell you, if I'd known I was going to live as long as I've lived, I would have taken better care of myself, and I would have bought gold. Because forget what gold is worth. Gold is worth $1,500 an ounce. Gold is worth, doesn't matter what it's worth in dollars, because dollars will cease to exist. Remember the motto? Gold is gold. You can always take it and trade it for something, whatever it is.
Right. Well, have you ever heard the saying, you can't eat gold?
Well, that's the other end of the spectrum. I always find it amazing that governments treat farmers abominably. I mean, they're taking away their lands. They don't give them any tax breaks. I mean, it just goes on. And I've always said to myself, what would we do without the farmers? What would we do without the land? And you can't eat fish all the time, and especially since even the oceans are becoming polluted now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Fukushima has devastated many parts of the Pacific, and it's not getting much better in the Gulf either with all the core exit and the disasters out there. However, I need to add to that because I've got a friend that reached out to us here at the Leak Project a few weeks ago, and he actually works deep sea. He'll go out for 28 days at a time in the Gulf, and he sent me pictures today close to oil, close to drills out there, and the water is crystal clear. I mean, you can see down 40, 50 feet, this aqua blue. It's beautiful. It doesn't look anything like the water next to Corpus Christi by any means.
That's true if you go out far enough and deep enough. But at some point, even that could be threatened if we keep going the way we're going. And that's why every so often you have the Earth flipping its slids, or flipping its polarities. The up is down and down is up, and you have the oceans and the mountains changing places every 25 or 30,000 years, i.e. Atlantis. We now know that the North Pole, the Arctic, and the Antarctic, they've done drilling down there looking for oil, and they pulled up petrified tropical vegetation over 40 or 400 million years old. So it begs the question, what happened? era that we now are experiencing.
Hmm. And the pole shifts could have possibly been caused. What do you think caused the pole shifts, Anthony?
Well, there's a very, very interesting book I read years ago called Worlds in Collision, and it's by Emanuel Velikovsky. And he was late 1940s, 1950s cosmologist. And one of his main theories was that Jupiter, the red spot on Jupiter, was once the occupying space of spot of Venus. Now, you know, in Greek mythology, it says Venus sprang from the head of Jupiter full grown. And if you read the accounts of what was going on in the world back in the biblical days, especially the 10 plagues of Egypt, they referred to Venus as the Beelzebub, Satan. What happened was, according to Velikovsky, it came so close to the Earth that it caused the Earth to shudder, hesitate in its orbit, and reverse its polarities, causing the oceans and the mountains to change places. The only reason Egypt was spared was because of the pivotal point of where it's situated, in that the oceans kind of flowed away from it and settled in the deep crevices of canyons and so on, and other mountain ranges. And there are whole valleys and mountains on the ocean floors, as high as mountain ranges, as high as we have the Rockies. And there's no doubt that I think every so often, when the Earth gets too polluted or too corrupted, I think nature does a cleansing process, and this is what happens. We came pretty close to it there with the Ice Age. What's that, 25 or 30,000 years ago. And when the glaciers were, when they retreated, they left the Great Lakes and all those 10,000 lakes in Minnesota and so on. So all that, what was it, the year 2000, what did he refer to it as? Worrying about computers breaking up.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What was that? Remember that? The acronym for that?
The Y2K?
Y2K, that was it. Not only that, I'm dyslexic on top of it. But anyway, I mean, that's the least of your problems if we're to be confronted by something like that again. And I think we are. So probably over the next 100 years, the safest place to be is probably up on that space station, where they could just hang out until everything settles down again and return.
And there's a very good possibility that if a proxy war goes overboard, that the entire globe could be, a domino effect, multiple countries going after each other. And one of the prophecies you make is flee to the mountaintops, the darkest caves, the bowels of the earth. World War III is upon us. The Mideast will ignite like a Roman candle. This current skirmish is aught but a prelude to global
conflagration.
Yes. Thank you. Now talk to us about this prophecy. This is spooky.
Well, again, I thought this possibly was going to refer to Gaddafi Duck, Muammar Gaddafi, when he set fire to the oil fields in was it Saudi? There was the Emirates, the oil Emirates. Remember when they had the war, and he set all the
Saddam Hussein in Iraq.
Yeah, he set, remember, hundreds of them aflame.
A bunch of them, yeah.
Yeah, and just before that, I had made that prediction, and as the years go by, it seems to me it was just as I've mentioned there, just like throwing a pebble in a mill pond. The ripple effect will just keep reaching out and out and out until it engulfs the whole world. You've got all of these so-called Arab terrorists. I just call them snakes with arms and legs, not real terrorists to me. Eventually, you've got sleepers, you've got moles. They're all over here in Canada. They're in the United States, and on command, they'll rise out of their rat holes and cause as much grief and destruction as they possibly can. And if you think about the adage that if the human race does not benefit to learn from its mistakes of the past, then we are destined to repeat them. And I'm old enough to remember the end of the war, and the history of it, and my parents, who were all soldiers, including my mother and so on. And they were terrified of the Nazis and the spies, the Germans and the Japanese and the Italians, who were hiding in the United States, in Canada, and they had to be rooted out and rounded up and put in concentration camps, including my father, who spent 2 years in a concentration camp until Mussolini was assassinated, and Italy returned to the Allies, and he was set free, and then he joined the Navy. He went from bad guy to hero in the whole 6 years of the war. So that's what we're looking at here, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse until somebody pushes the button, another 9/11 or something of that, and then it's just going to quit. Then you got to gain too many people. Have you been to Europe, Rex?
I have not.
Well, I went traveling with Sylvester Stallone's mother, who was a brilliant astrologer, I should add, and she hit on this thing called rumpology, which was just a big joke. It was reading the bums of people because they give off electrical perturbations. And we traveled all over. We went to New York and L.A. and Germany and Israel and Paris and what do you call it? Moscow, and it brought to my attention how small Europe really is. You stand in, if you're in Berlin, if you're in Israel, any of those Eastern countries where they're fighting the Hebrew people, like you walk 5 feet and you're in another country. And I used to wonder why Europeans could speak 4 or 5 languages. Well, now I know. There's no room. All you have to do is, what is it? The left bank and the right bank and the Arabs fighting the Jews and Jews fighting. It all comes down to, again, too many people, not enough room, not enough arable land. And like if you throw a bunch of rats in a cage, overcrowded, they'll start cutting each other's throat in order to give themselves some breathing space. And this is what happens with the human race. And we'll certainly explode, absolutely, unless nature, eradicates 2/3 of the human population and start all over again. It just, forget politics, forget the religion, forget all that. It comes right down to survival of the fittest or the smartest and the luckiest.
Are you going to stay in the city where you're at when that happens?
At my age, I'll tell you the truth. I mean, nobody's in a big hurry to die, but I wouldn't want to be a young person just starting out and have to try to survive World War III and what's coming up after it and during it. I firmly believe that these, as you know, I'm not a religious person in the traditional sense. That kind of belief in God to me is just like believing in Santa Claus. When my mother told me when I was of a certain age, when she told me that Santa Claus didn't exist, well, for me, that kind of God didn't exist either, there I was. She broke my heart at the tender age of 32.
She didn't tell you until Santa Claus was 32? You mean Santa Claus ain't real?
I knew what side my bread was buttered on. I said, what? There's no Santa, So, our Western culture believes in that kind of personal God in the sense of, he's making a list, he's checking it twice, he's going to find out who's naughty and nice. Santa God is coming to town. Two are interchangeable. So, but, I think back in certain passages of Genesis, and, Cain slew Abel. Was it Abel slew Cain? Cain slew Abel. And ran into hiding, and God says, I see you. Come out, Abel. Did Cain slew Abel? Cain, right? Come out, Cain. No, I don't want to. Well, you think of these computers that the military, they can put a smart bomb right into a mouse hole somewhere in a little adobe hut way out in the middle of the Sahara Desert and put it. If we can do that now with our modern technology, how much more would these gods be advanced that they can see everything that goes on from a distance from wherever they are, in that sense that they have to be extraterrestrials who are far, far advanced than we are and can do incredible things, including possibly raising the dead through cloning, and we're just experimenting with DNA and stem cell research and all that now. I just feel that, like I said, we're either dead, that's all there is to it. And if you've ever had surgery and you put that needle in your arm and you're out, you don't worry about whether you're going to live or die or it's an afterlife. You're gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second possibility, of course, is that the electrical spark that leaves the body at death retracts into its original shape like a little spark, as when you throw a log on a fire, and it contains in that little spark everything you've ever done, your memories, all of your loved ones, your pictures, all of that, noises, sounds, and returns to the universe in much the same as your computer has memory banks. And I think we discussed this last time. Just because someone has a stroke or they've had brain damage through an accident of some kind, that information is not lost. It's there. It's just irretrievable at the moment. And that was one of my predictions, which I noticed you didn't include in the list here, but that the possibility of bringing back the memories of people who have been suffered Alzheimer's or been damaged is now in the process of being retrieved through an incredible new medical breakthrough to do with the blue light that's shone upon a particular cell that the clone from one of the living cells. I have the paper here, but I had made that prediction several years ago. As a matter of fact, it's somewhere in my books here in the medical.
You know, I had no idea before the first time that we did the presentation that I spoke with you, Anthony. I did not know all of the people that are in Hollywood and other positions of prestige. I didn't know that you rubbed elbows with them. That's pretty cool. You've met some amazing people along the way, haven't you?
I rubbed their palms.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what I remember, you described the palm of Michael Jackson on your website, anthonycarrpsychic.com, and you talk about how the lines show that he's going to have an abrupt death, a painful life, and just the amount of information that you can pick up with somebody's palm is mind-boggling.
That story ran in the tabloids, the Globe, and I think he was only 10 or 12 years old. And I said, for some reason, I said, this kid is going to come to a tragic end. Scandal, sex, heartbreak, bankruptcy, and finally death. Those were the, I think, four categories. That was 1984. I never did forget that. And as recently as I ran in the National Enquirer about, I think, 6 months before his final illness, so to speak.
Do you read the left palm or the right?
Both. Left palm is your inherited traits, the things you were born with from your past lifetimes, things that you bring with you into this existence. And the right hand contains all the things that you're trying to control and pick up in this incarnation called life now on Earth. And I believe, just like an astrology chart, you can't overcome your fate or your destiny, which is in the left hand. Ultimately, you will be delivered the things that your destiny, your chart, if you're into astrology, or your left palm, or your left hand promises. Now you can reverse that process if you're left-handed. The right will be the inherited traits and talents that you inherited from your forebears. Depends on that cord that separates the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain. Was it the corpus coriaceum or something like that? Then the electrical current crisscrosses there. Some people, very few of them are ambidextrous, so they can use the left hand equally well as they can the right hand. And here's that, most feared diseases, blah, 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 blah. Medical science makes dramatic advances in 3 of the world's most feared diseases, so much so that entire populations will breathe a collective sigh of relief, almost palpable. Even death itself will be conquered. Familiar protein enzymes will herald a major breakthrough in the treatment of Parkinson's disease and other like diseases. Organic in nature, something in them adheres to and breaks down the elements which trigger deterioration of the brain that causes these debilitating physical aspects, trembling hands, etc. This treatment will stop them in their tracks. The same treatment will be applied to sufferers of Alzheimer's with equally remarkable results. And this article came out, let's see, it came out, and as we speak here, anyway, it was in one of your American papers, and, here it is. Could memories, now this is March 19th, right? And I've been making that prediction I read to you 20, 30 years ago. Could memories lost to Alzheimer's be recovered? Scientists had assumed for a long time that the disease destroys how those memories are encoded and makes them disappear forever. But what if they weren't actually gone, just inaccessible? A new paper published Wednesday by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Nobel Prize-winning Susumu Tanagawa, Japanese of course, provides the first strong evidence of this possibility and raises the hope of future treatments that could reverse some of the ravages of the disease. The important point is, this is proof of concept, he says. That is to say that even if a memory seems to be gone, it is still there. It's just a matter of retrieving it. So, it has something to do with they tested this thing on mice. Both groups of mice were given a mild electric shock to their feet. First group appeared to remember the trauma of the incident by showing fear when placed back in the box where they had been given the shock. The Alzheimer's mice, they injected them with Alzheimer's cells or something, on the other hand, seemed to quickly forget what happened and did not have a negative reaction to the box. But the reaction changed dramatically when the scientists stimulated tagged cells in their brains in the hippocampus. That is the part of the brain that encodes short-term memories with a special blue light. When they were put back in the box following the procedure, their memories of the shock appeared to have returned and they displayed the same fear as their healthy counterparts. So, Tanawanga says, and his colleagues wrote that the treatment appears to have boosted neurons to regrow small buds called dendritic spines that form connections with other cells. These revelations have shattered a 20-year paradigm of how we're thinking about the disease. Memories were just the technique used in the study. Optical stimulation of brain cells, or optogenetics, involves the insertion of a gene into parts of the brain to make them sensitive to the blue light and then stimulating them with the light. So the potential to rescue long-term memory loss in dementia is exciting. So I made that prediction years and years ago, and here they are substantiating what I've long believed, that the electrical neurons, the energy, the soul, that electrical spark that leaves the body at death, is that which is immortal. That is, there's no male, there's no female, because genitalia is only for the purpose of procreation. That little spark is what we call the immortal soul, and that cannot be destroyed. Now, whether it returns to this little speck of dust called Earth in another form, metempsychosis, metatransmigration, in that the soul can pass at death into not just another human, but another form altogether, an animal, a vegetable, possibly onto other galaxies and dimensions and so on. But all of that is never destroyed. So we're either dead, these extraterrestrials, these gods, can raise us from the dead, from the graves, just by taking a little bit of the DNA, much like Jurassic Park, and raising you up. And it says in the Genesis, you will know your friends and your loved ones as you did when you were asleep. So, talk about Humphrey Bogart's movie, The Big Sleep. So it could be thousands of years, yet just the dust contains everything about you that is you. So it's not a replica of you. You're not a walking zombie. You will be you again. That's the second possibility. And then this electrical spark, which is part and parcel of the physical body and the universe, will be reunited as one.
Now that could explain the trying to entome these bodies so much and preserve them, so the more DNA they would have to replicate that being. And also, I don't know if you've heard this, but Madonna doesn't want anybody getting access to any type of her DNA, whether it be a hair sample or anything. And I know that she's very metaphysical. She does study hermetics and the occult a lot. You can tell by the videos that she does, and that's fine. That's her path. Maybe that's why, because she doesn't want someone to get access to her hair and make up a voodoo doll or something and sabotage her astrally or something like that. There's plenty of speculations you can get to, but another thing that I was very fascinated with, Anthony, you've got so many incredible prophecies, and just hitting these 10 that I want to discuss with you is taking probably a little bit longer than an hour. So if we need to cut out short, I understand, or if we can continue, that'd be great. But I've got just a few more on here that I think are really important, because one of them, you talk about a wave of pneumonia hitting North America, like a big time, horrific, very bad event. And is that something you see happening soon? And could you walk us through that vision?
Well, funny you should mention. I was at a doctor's office today, and I had said that a form of pneumonia will resurface, which will kill off hundreds, if not millions, of people, especially the older people and the very young. And I saw this pamphlet on the while I was waiting to see the doctor on his desk there, and I picked it up. And what's it say here? You ready for this? It says, pneumococcal pneumonia is serious enough to put you in the hospital and worse, but it can be prevented, especially if you are 50 and over. And then it talks about who's at risk. Of course, 50 years of age and over, or very young, 18 and under. And it's called any of these infections. It says here, what is pneumococcal disease? It is any infection caused by the bacteria Streptococcus pneumoniae, or pneumococcus. The most severe manifestations: pneumonia, lung infection; bacteremic pneumonia, lung infection with bacteria in the bloodstream; sepsis, bacteria in bloodstream; meningitis, inflammation around the brain. And a very good doctor friend of mine's wife was stricken with that just last year, and she just pulled through by the skin of her teeth. So funny you should mention that and bring this up. And I picked this up right in the doctor's office and said it is on the increase, and the spreading exponentially is what it says.
And then, okay. And so another one, too, that I wanted to bring up was...
Did we talk about this last month? I've always had a theory that sharks, they can grow new sets of teeth, just as a matter of course. I always wondered why we can't. Amphibians, frogs, guppies, not guppies, they don't have legs, but frogs, anyway, you cut off a frog's leg, or it'll grow back. I believe there's a gene inside us that is very dormant, and all it needs is to be unlocked. And we could, establish what I said here, fabulous new surgical technology allows a deformed and truncated limbs to be inserted with donor bone, which adheres to the skeleton by means of the body's natural, quote-unquote, glue, for want of a better term. Example, kids born with flipper-like hands attached directly to shoulders. That was that thalidomide kids, remember that? We've read about it. Also kids without arms or their feet that sprout from the hips, but not from the legs, something like E.T. Finally, the discovery of the gene that triggers the growth of new limbs, teeth, etc. If sharks and amphibians can do it, why not us? And I really, really believe in that. 50 years ago, I prophesied that all alphabet diseases, that is to say MS and D, ALS, ALD respectively, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, better known as Lou Gehrig's disease. It's interesting to note, lately they've said that Lou Gehrig didn't die from Lou Gehrig's disease, he died from something else. So Lou Gehrig did not die of the disease named after him, apparently. Adrenoleukodystrophy, that was his. Then there's the Lorenzo's oil. And I knew the mother and the aunt. Remember the movie Lorenzo's Oil?
Oh yeah.
The aunt of this young boy was the sister of the mother, and as a matter of fact, very interesting. She was a nun, and her husband was a former priest, Dominican priest, I think, and they left the priesthood to get married. It's almost like the old joke, who's your father? Well, he's a priest, and and they had two.
Right.
So anyway, all these will soon be eradicated. So it's with remarkable success, a holistic approach to mental disease, including manic depression, schizophrenia, et al., brings about their control through a regime of strict diet and mild electricity whose minerals and current directly affects the brain's serotonin and synapses. Again, going back to the electrical balancing of the soul, if you want, or that electrical spark. And apparently, you have to remember, you don't have to, but I suggest you remember that I've been writing these predictions, the same ones for 50 years, without putting a time limit of 12 months on them. So we're very close to solving all these problems of regenerating severed nerve endings, the spinal cord injuries. Hence, ever my refrain, dead legs shall walk again. Again, I prophesied over a half a century ago that all of the above medical problems soon will be eradicated, and now miraculously through stem cell research, all this is now coming to pass. So, I really think. Now, you remember the movie with Brad Pitt, Benjamin Button?
Yeah, where he reverses age.
Right. Now, there is a disease, I'm sure you're aware, which I'm sure is called progeria. Progeria. These are children who are born old and grow older exponentially. Now, Brad Pitt starred in an interesting movie called The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, a medical anomaly similar to the above-mentioned disease. Science soon will locate and identify the aberrant gene that triggers this horrible affliction, as well as the slower, more familiar one we refer to as old age, and then reverse it. Therefore, the need for souls and beings, for new souls and beings, will cease as the process repeats. And thus shall it be with new limbs and new teeth. So, scientists clone a live Tyrannosaurus rex from the cell nucleus of the dust of its long dead bones, in which resides the DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. So, wow, maybe they'll sell them as pets and guard dogs, sort of like guard dinos or dinos. Then we can walk or hop them leash-free area at the beach or boardwalk, where they can romp, chomp, and frolic with the other dinos and doggies.
Look what my dino can do.
I predict stem cell implantation will ultimately bring about something akin to immortality, repaired or new eyes, kidneys, brains, hearts, a damaged heart is currently repairing itself with the owner's very own stem cells in Montreal, even now as you and I speak, Rex. So,
I got to interject real quick here, Anthony. I'm looking at an article that came out. There's several of these that I've read in the same reference. It's man's finger grows back thanks to pig bladder powder. And you can watch the video time-lapsed where this guy literally regrows his finger out of his house based on some biotech that the college, it's in South Florida, this doctor uses pig bladder, basically powder, and sprinkles it on his finger like pixie dust, and after a couple of weeks it regrows. It's pretty cool. So that kind of interjects there, I think, in parallels with what you're talking about. If you can do stuff like that out of your own house, regrow your finger with some help from your college buddies, that's pretty amazing.
Are you kidding me, or this is already?
No, I'll send the link for our listeners and people that have an opportunity to watch this podcast, youtube.com/clandestine time lord. Make sure to subscribe, get access to all the latest podcasts first and free. Yeah, this is the real deal. There's been many articles that I've read about this guy, but one in specific that I'm looking at right now is on the Huffington Post, and you can actually watch a minute video on it that shows how the whole process was done in 60 seconds. So it's pretty cool. And the technologies that we have the opportunity to be a part of now is amazing. If you look at some of the nanotech, I know that they're using very small like nanotech chips that will piggyback off of certain bacterias now, and that bacteria will go to a certain part of the body, and then the nano chip releases whatever it's going to be used for, and it's pretty incredible what they're going to be able to do in the future. So certainly I like your parallels that you bring with the Bible and some of the prophecies that were talked about back then. People look at it more spiritually, I guess you could say, or religiously, that have got that dogmatic background. And when I say dogmatic, all I mean by that is certain principles and rules and regulations that you live by. Now, what you're referring to, though, makes a lot more practical sense, in my opinion, because when you talk about some of the parallels of what we're doing now and the reference points in the Old Testament, bringing people back from what it was like when they're in that dream state, that sounds to me like reincarnation, taking the DNA and making another body, like the film that Arnold Schwarzenegger was in, The Sixth Day, where they basically plug and play bodies. And it's very interesting to bring up these possibilities, and that's fascinating. Now, the next thing I was going to ask you about here is you talk about the big players in this World War III scenario, the large red stars, Yugoslavia and the Balkans about to explode, Australia, New Zealand thrust onto the world stage with warships and missiles, a Russian politician assassinated. I just wanted to throw that all in the same, paragraph there. Yeah, so talk to us about that. I mean, give us some visions and options, what you think that means. Is that all a part of the World War III scenario?
It is. That particular vibe, the picture has been with me for a long time. I can't seem to rid myself of it. It just seems sort of in between New Zealand, Australia. There's a gathering or a theater of what do you call them? Aircraft carriers and ships and battleships and again ICBMs, missiles. There's something there that everybody wants around in between New Zealand and Australia, and they're fighting over it, or they're gearing up. Almost whether it comes quite right down to it at that point, I'm not certain. But it's, you know, the story about somebody blinked during the Cuba crisis with Kennedy and Russia when they were setting up missiles bases in Cuba.
Missile bases in Cuba. Are you talking about the missile Cuba crisis back in the day?
Right. It feels something akin to that. And there's a standoff, and it can go either way. It doesn't happen. Someone or something backs down right at the last minute. It doesn't go the whole 9 yards, and then they'll back off, or everybody backs away from it. This picture I've had in my mind's eye for many years. It's getting larger and larger. With my predictions and my visions, it's akin to looking through the wrong end of a pair of binoculars. It's either very small and far away, and as it draws closer, it draws nigh, it begins to look larger and looms a lot closer, as though I turned around and discovered I was looking through the wrong end of the binoculars. So this here seems to be getting closer and closer. What it is exactly, I'm not sure. Also, as we speak, you and I get the what's that, Mariana Trench?
Which word?
The Mariana Trench. It's supposed to be the deepest part of the ocean. That I believe what's the name? The director of the Titanic went down there last year. It was 4 or 5 miles. He went down to one of those deep sea bubbles.
Oh, very cool.
Sorry?
Oh, I said very cool. I hadn't heard about that.
Oh, the Titanic, the last Titanic movie with DiCaprio, and he's from Toronto, the director. Did a lot of those movies with Schwarzenegger.
James Cameron.
James Cameron, right. As we speak, now is Mariana Trench around there? It's coming to me as I was telling you this story.
So that's fascinating.
Is it there?
Okay, so let's go back. That you said, ask me the question again.
Well, as I was talking to you about the gathering force, the gathering storm around Australia and aircraft carriers and IBs, the words the Mariana Trench came to me. Is that around there? Australia, New Zealand?
I'm pulling it up right now. That is actually the deep. Okay, so it's located in the western Pacific Ocean, close to the Marina Islands. I'm going to pull this up right now. And kind of. I mean, it looks like it's in between Japan and Papua New Guinea. So Philippines would be to the left of it, and it's kind of right there by Guam, actually. It's real close to Guam.
So it's in the general ballpark.
Yeah, it is, because Australia's south of there. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so for some reason, that area or something about it will trigger this confluence of military activity. Possibly someone wants to test a horrific nuclear device down in the Mariana Trench, and other forces are opposed to it. They think, this is coming to me, that it may trigger a chain reaction of all the fault lines in the world. How's that? That just came to me as you told me that.
Oh, that sounds like some fresh doom right there, triggering all fault lines. Wonderful. Yeah. Do you think that...
I never knew what that picture until now, you and I discussing it. You're kind of a pretty good catalyst for me.
Yeah, fascinating. Fascinating. And I don't know if you've
Careful
put...
what you ask for, Rex, you just might get it.
Well, hey, I certainly wouldn't want to be close to any fault lines when something like that takes place or next to the coast. I mean, I've got family in the Northwest, and, you know, if there was a tsunami or something like that, you know, I'd be definitely worried about them. And also with all the different possibilities, have you heard the Planet X theory?
Briefly,
It's a specific planet that's
tangentially.
okay. It's a specific planet that's supposed to have a 3,600-year orbit. There's been every theory under the sun about if it exists or not, but even a lot of researchers now are saying they found something in between Jupiter and Saturn that they can't explain that wasn't there before, some type of planet. And whether or not it's real or it's going to come back and cause chaos, that's certainly on many people's minds right now. And there's been so many catastrophes as far as natural, like sinkholes and earthquakes, and a lot of events that have been taking place as well. Some people speculate that might be the cause of some of it. I'm wondering if you've ever had a vision in reference to seeing some type of giant planet in the sky that shouldn't be there, or heavenly body.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't pick up any catastrophes created by that, Planet X or whatever. I do believe there are other, of course, planets out there that are parallel worlds to our own. However, the extraterrestrials, or as the ancients called them, the Anunnaki, I think it was, the Anunnaki, meaning those who came from the heavens or from the stars. If gods were, and don't forget, it says in not only the Christian Bible, also in the Quran and the Mosaic books, the Pentateuch, the 5 Mosaic books that the Hebrews, the Jewish people, adhere to, always talk about the gods and their hosts that came from the heavens, or came from the skies and the stars. So there's no doubt that something or other came from beyond. If they needed to be within a certain area or within a certain distance from the Earth, that might explain. Perhaps it is one of those planets that has an orbital path of, I don't know, 100,000 years before it comes back to the nearest point to the Earth again. And I was got those two words mixed up: the apogee and the other one, which means one means closest point from a heavenly body to another one, and there's another word that means the opposite. But don't ask me; I don't even know my own name at this point. Anyway, I think that's how they would manage to jump from that planet to Earth. It's interesting to note that the 18th Psalm in the book of Psalms, which talks and describes perfectly, to me, about a UFO, again, was God a star traveler, which talks about a UFO rising from Mount Sinai. And do you have it there in my book that I sent you? Now there is for years I've always been mesmerized by the ancient Egyptian scarab.
Oh yeah, yep. You flip it upside down. Okay, I'm looking at it right now. Yes.
I accidentally took a coffee table book, and it talks about the scarab beetle, which is a dung beetle, goes around eating poop, basically. I said, why would anyone in his right or wrong mind worship a beetle, a dung beetle at that, right?
Right.
Until I held it up, and it was a dark and stormy night, and it was raining, and it was storm, boom, lightning, kind of like Mary Shelley in the original Frankenstein. And the crack of lightning came through the window, and the book jumped out of my hand and it landed on the ground. I picked it up, and I picked it up upside down, and I looked at it. I said, my God, no pun intended. I said, this is not a dung beetle at all. I said, look at this. We've been looking at this thing the wrong way, the wrong side up, for 5,000 years. If you look at it upside down, which to me is right side up, it is a spacecraft taking off. Do you have the picture there?
Yes,
right.
I sure do. I'm looking at it right now.
It says not this side up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this side up with the bird upside down. You see the wings? You see the You see at the bottom of it, the blast site, that
The flames, the thrusters, I sure do.
see and around it are the legs, the tripod on which it rested.
I sure
Those are
do.
wings. Those are the scarab beetle, are not wings of it. Those are the bright lights and the power and the fire as the thing is lifting off.
Yeah, I'm looking right at it. You can see it with the outline, and it looks kind of like a space shuttle that would land or as it's blasting off. And you can see, yep,
And
definitely see it.
and you know, you look at the so now can you see the spaceship now as I had it outlined here. Now, whoever or whatever came to this Earth, perhaps they had to be close enough to be able to make the. I mean, when you think of space travel these days, you think of quantum physics and quantum leaps with wormholes, and no time exists at all. You don't need to traverse the fathomless oceans of cosmic space and time. If you think of the fan, one of those slow-moving overhead fans like in Casablanca, Humphrey Bogart, those slow-moving blades, if you think of one dimension to another, if you're on that sympathetic vibration level, you could actually just step through those blades, through the spaces of the blades as they roll, and into another dimension. So you would think they would be able to do that. Maybe they weren't that far advanced at that time. They needed a spacecraft like this, like a rocket ship or the shuttle, which would explain why a planet like Planet X would have to be at a certain proximity from the Earth for them to make the journey. How else, or why else would they need a rocket ship on Mount Sinai, which now, if you read the 18th Psalm, and it makes more sense. And here's what it says. There is a passage in the Bible which describes the landing of a huge spacecraft. God, in the form of a star traveler, helps David defeat his enemies. So, from Psalm 18, quote, "In my distress, I called upon," this is David talking now, right? Because he's feeling he's going to be wiped out. "In my distress, I called upon the Lord for help." In brackets, I put, so David is in trouble, so he communicates with his protector, the star traveler on Mount Sinai. Continues, quote, "From his temple," brackets, the UFO, "he heard my voice, and I am saved from mine enemies," brackets, "message received and understood." To continue. "Then the earth reeled and rocked," just like Chuck Berry's song, "reeling and rocking." Anyway, "then the earth reeled and rocked. The foundations also of the mountains trembled and quaked because he was angry." So in brackets, I got, "the powerful engines of the spacecraft caused earth-like reverberations throughout the immediate area." To continue. "Then smoke went up from his nostrils," that is to say, emissions from the rocket exhausts, "and devouring fire from his mouth. Glowing coals did flame forth from him," meaning the heat from the engines burns the grasses, shrubs, and kindles stones in the immediate vicinity of the blast site. The heat becomes so intense as the engines accelerate that small rocks in the vicinity of the thrusting, blasting rockets begin to ignite. To continue. "Then he rode on a cherub and flew. He came swiftly upon the wings of the wind. He smote," that is to say, killed mine enemies, "with arrows of lightning." Arrows of lightning, brackets I put, laser rays from the UFOs. "The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice at the blast of the breath of thy nostrils." Brackets. The craft rumbled, and it roared and accelerated overhead. And the last sentence I put, "No wonder David sang the Lord's praises. He would have been a dead duck without him." Now that's the 18th Psalm. I don't know what, people, "Oh, it was an earthquake." No. Arrows of lightning flowing high, thundering voice overhead. These are the engines, the jets flying, the whole schmear. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, my friend, I see by the old clock on the wall. Can we continue this another time, or?
That'd be fantastic. It's certainly always great to speak with you. And maybe next time we have the opportunity to speak, Anthony, we could talk about some of the star charts and different ways to do palm readings and stuff.
Sure, or if you want, we can go Hollywood. We can do all the stories and the anecdotes about all the celebrities I've read for and how I came about.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Absolutely. That'd be fantastic.
And Jacqueline herself is a whole other. Actually, we should get her on and do a show together.
Oh, that'd be just an absolute pleasure. And anything that we can do to help, please let us know. And let me ask you this. You've met like Howard Stern. You've met Roseanne Barr. you've
Yeah.
met Sylvester Stallone and his family, and all these pictures that I've seen you in with them, it seems like they're just so happy to be around you, like you guys have known each other forever.
Well, it's the Italian blood. What can I say? Santina, think give me I'll cut you cojones off.
That's
Is
awesome.
this a family-oriented show, or can we use a little profanity once in a while?
I mean, hey, if you want to throw a couple words out there, I mean, that's okay.
Coast to coast. I mean, if you say "damn," it's like going back to Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, they're a little stricter.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Well, you know what you would have said these days, right? Dare I say it? Frankly, my dear, I don't give a.
Yes, indeed. It's a little bit of a different genre we live in today.
Well, why don't we plan on that? I'll get a hold of Jacqueline. She's 94, but she's still game, and maybe we can set up something for the next show.
That'd be fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. We have returning guest Anthony Carr from AnthonyCarrPsychic.com, the world's most documented psychic. We had him on here a few weeks ago, and one of the predictions that he made live during the podcast, well, it was out in Astoria, Oregon, close to a drawbridge out there, and I got information about 2 weeks after we did that presentation from an anonymous source showing documents that there is a multi-million-dollar, multi-year project in that same area that has a natural gas pipeline out there, and they just shut it down with no reason as to why, no explanation. They just said, we're shutting it down, we're sorry, that's it. And I don't know what they know that we don't. Also, I need to bring up that a prediction that Mr. Carr made before Mount St. Helens erupted the first time back in, I think, 1980. And he made a prediction again in 2012 that Mount St. Helens is going to erupt again, and it's going to be worse than it was the first time. Now, another thing interesting is when we had the presentation last time, we talked about Astoria, Oregon as well, how Mr. Carr saw possibly a plane crash close to that bridge and flames. And what I didn't bring up on the last podcast was I had a friend that actually passed away from a plane accident that he got in out there, and it was a small Cessna. It was just a private plane. That was very interesting. He might have picked up something there. Mr. Carr is acclaimed psychic to the stars, being called the most documented psychic in the world because of all his predictions that have come to fruition, such as the events of 9/11, India's Taj Mahal-ocaust, the attack on Paris, bin Laden and Ghadafis' death, and many more documented predictions. Now, he's also received repeated accolades from the Toronto Star for his astonishing predictions, and tonight we're going to discuss the top 11 predictions for 2016 and beyond. It was just going to be 10, but I had to throw one more out there that I just figured it has to be on everybody's minds right now. And you talked about this many years ago, Anthony, about Hillary Clinton is going to be the next president, and she's going to be much more of an iron fist than Thatcher was. How are you doing? Thanks a lot for joining us.
Well, my pleasure, Rex. And I'm once again very happy to be here. I enjoyed our podcast from last time. And what were we talking about during our last podcast? Was it the world predictions, or was it the Houdini mystery code unraveled? What was the show last time we did?
Well, we talked a lot about... Nanny, 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 nanny.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, remember last time we talked a lot about the possibility of our DNA being altered from, an extraterrestrial species, possibly the Anunnaki.
Right.
And then you made that prediction live on the air, which was incredible. So, one of the things that you've written predictions down now for years, and you've got just so many of them. I picked through some of the gems in your Stargazer updates here, and I wanted to just bring up the first one with the Hillary Clinton scenario. Now, when you came up with that prediction, I mean, it was quite a long time ago. What was it like, the vision that you had?
Well, I had envisioned, and remember, these visions do not come with any soundtracks for me. My grandmother was clairaudient. This is the one I I think I mentioned before she missed the Titanic by 4 hours,
Uh-huh.
and she never saw visions in that she was not a clairvoyant, but she was clairaudient. She could hear the universe talking to her, and in a sense, or internalize it, or the sensation of feeling it, the vibrations transformed into words in her psyche. And the universe, of course, takes pictures of everything. It also records all the sounds. So some people are clairvoyant, that is clear seeing, and others are, pardon me, I just washed my mouth, I can't do a thing with it. But the clairvoyant, that is clear seeing, as pictures in their mind's eye. Clairaudio, they hear things, hear voices, hear sounds. Others are clairsentient, you get that, as you know, the expression, the gut feeling. When it came to Hillary Clinton, I saw her standing on the podium with both fingers up in the victory sign. This was, 10, 12 years ago, long before she announced that she was going to run for the presidency the first time. So I had to make out my yearly predictions for my book, Stargazer Predictions and Prophecies. And so I said I have a strong feeling or strong vision of if I have to interpret the picture correctly in my mind's eye. And quite often, other people could probably interpret my visions better than I can, because as I've said, I have no soundtrack that goes with it and no subtitles, as in the old silent movies. So even I have to guess at what the universe delivers to me, because a lot of people believe psychics and the like can manipulate the universe, make things happen as though we are imbued or endowed with a power, unlike most other people, but it's not true. We are nothing more than vehicles, much like your computer, your radio, and when it's fine-tuned just correctly, these images and visions and sounds will come through. Quite often, if you or anyone else is looking at the screen in my mind's eye, which is controlled by the third eye or the pineal gland, which is between your two eyes, your two eyebrows, and slightly above it, which is why we look upward when we're trying to analyze the picture. We're looking heavenwardly. And again, I saw her with her fingers up in victory, and I thought to myself, well, I got a feeling. Oh, and then there was the word president, or presidential race, and the word GOP. And by the way, not to digress too much, what does GOP mean?
The Grand Old Party. Grand Old Party.
That's what it sounds. That's what
Yeah.
it stands for.
Yep. Grand Old Party.
God, oh, Cracker Barrel.
I know, right?
Anyway, so I saw the word president and GOP, so I took a wild guess and at my own vision and said I think she'll be ultimately she'll be the first woman president of the United States. Well, of course, years later she came perilously close. There's still a very good chance, and I can't renege on my predictions. You know, I have to stand by them because, as you so eloquently put it, I am the world's most documented psychic. It should be subtitles and brackets, but not necessarily always the most accurate. So anyway, as you well know, I don't make any bones about it. I am definitely not a Donald Trump fan, and I mean, he's a great entertainer. Our late mayor, Rob Ford, was very, very entertaining in the same ilk as Mr. Trump, and also one of our former mayors, Mayor Lassman, was also of that ilk, very entertaining. And for my money, all you're ever going to get from any politician, no politician is going to change your life at all, one way or the other, whether you like him or don't, except if they happen to be very entertaining, and that's all you're going to get for your vote. If you look at Mr. Trump as an entertainer, he's terrific. If you look at him as the presidential hope for, it's to be feared and dreaded. I just can't see him becoming president of the United States. To me, to vote for Donald Trump would be akin to voting to Adolf Hitler. And I never thought I'd ever say anything good about Hitler, but at least Hitler was a real soldier and that he served in World War I. And Mr. Trump, with his money, bought himself out of Vietnam, but he seems to be very quick to want to send everybody else's kids to war. So I don't have much use, as we've already discussed, for spoiled rich kids, you know, who were brought up with a silver spoon in their mouths. Not just him, Even here in Canada, you have your Conrad Black, you have your our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. I have all the respect in the world for a man and a woman who can pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and make it on their own without anybody handing it to them, because anyone that's spoiled really doesn't know what it's like on the other side of the spectrum, to be that poor, to have to come up the hard way, to have people look down on you. He will never, or anybody like him, will never really enjoy what they have. They may think they're enjoying their cars and their millions and their billions and their women and all these things, and I'm sure they are. But not as much as if they truly had come from dirt, poor, poverty, and then pulled. That way they would have the other side to judge against and to truly appreciate what it really is to be well off.
Right. And do you feel that if Trump was to make it into office, when you compare him to Hitler, do you think that he would round people up based upon their lineage and heritage as well? Kind of, these roundup camps?
Hey, there's a law for the rich, there's a law for the poor. And basically, he's a white racist, what do you call it, a white supreme. And that said, for all his blow and his bluster, if it came right down to it and he actually did become president, I think, being a blowhard, that he would just back down on a lot of the things that he's promised to do. I don't think he really has the guts to go out in the street and get into what I would call a fist fight in that sense. The